There was a 4-inch gap between the bottom of the couch and the floor in the storage closet turned office that 3 of us shared at Wunderman many years ago. So, naturally, that space became the goal when we played hockey with a crumpled up piece of paper and a couple of old sticks. Now, I don't remember how many games I won back then, but I do remember creating a ton of work I'm really proud of to this day. We all did. Because we and our bosses knew that those impromptu games were part of our jobs. Playtime equals let the junk in your head jostle around for a bit so it can turn into an interesting nugget or two time. And we knew we wouldn't be judged for taking that time. In today's language, this would be called psychological safety. Back then, it was just a basic understanding of how creative brains work. This is the kind of behavior Jaime Raul Zepeda recognizes in his role as EVP at Best Companies Group. The best places to work are the ones who provide psychological safety, where leaders are vulnerable and understand what their teams need, because they ask. We need work to be more like this again. We've turned it into a hyper-optimized shit show of efficiency, but we don't even know why we do half of what we do. We need to be less busy and more thoughtful. Maybe I should stop coaching folks and just show up at companies with a few hockey sticks and some crumpled up paper. Welcome to the DesuckifyWork podcast, the show where we cut through the BS and find ways to make work more fun, more human, and less ridiculous. All of which makes your business more profitable, by the way. If you enjoyed this one, please like, share, rate, review, or subscribe to the podcast. Let the desuckifying begin. Here's Jaime. Okay, Jaime Raul Zepeda. Welcome to the DesuckifyWork podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for coming on. I know we chatted a little while ago, but it's been a bit. I'd love to give you a chance to introduce yourself to the audience. Tell us a bit about what you do for work and how you came to be doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm currently the Executive Vice President and Principal Consultant at Best Companies Group. And at Best Companies Group, we essentially help organizations understand and improve their workplace environment by looking at ways where they can improve their employees' engagement and effectiveness. So that's just a long way of saying we help create amazing workplaces. And we help organizations use data to help create amazing workplaces where their people can thrive. And my story of how I got to this point, it actually started with a book that I read a long time ago, Drive by Dan Pink. Have you read that book?
I haven't read it, but I'm aware of it. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, and so that book was just talking about what really are the drivers to motivation, especially at work. And that just really got my gears going to understand how can we improve the way that we spend the time at work, since we spend so much time working more than we do really with anything else. We spend more time with our coworkers than with our partners and spouses. Yeah. And that just really got me into this track of helping organizations become better workplaces, which I've been doing for 15 years now.
Yeah. I mean, how do you find your way into that niche? I mean, it's an interesting niche. Recognition of workplaces and also helping folks get better at it. I feel like there's a handful of groups that do that kind of thing. I mean, what do you study? What path ultimately got you into this?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I got lucky because once I was reading that book, I started doing the same thing you just asked me. What organizations out there are doing this kind of work? And so that was about 15 years ago. This was still when the idea of like employee engagement and building great workplaces, all that was still fairly fringe, right? Not every organization was bought in on that you got to keep your employees engaged and happy and all that. And I found this organization, which was a great place for me to learn a lot of this, called The Great Place to Work. And so Great Place to Work still does this, but back then was a partner of Fortune magazine to build the 100 best companies to work for list. Okay. Probably see it every year when you're like in the grocery store and you see Fortune magazine's list. Yeah. And so that started a 15-year career of really exploring what makes a workplace great. What do they do with employees? How do employees then go above and beyond with within an organizational culture that treats them with respect and fairness and kindness and care, and really working with organizations directly to answer those questions, right? That was partly what Great Place to Work did, and what we do now at Best Companies Group is we get pulled into conversations at companies where they're trying to figure out how do we improve our retention, because we don't really think that our employees are as happy or as engaged as they could be, and we have really great conversations and explore that.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned that it was kind of a fringe thing back when you were getting into it. And I'm curious, there's certainly a lot of talk about it, right? I think it's entered the mainstream in that way. How have attitudes in the workplaces evolved in terms of how important they view things like employee engagement and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, it's better now than it was 15, 20 years ago. It's part of the conversation. I think every CEO and C-suite is wondering what their Glassdoor rating is. That's just a conversation that happens now more than it ever did.
Yeah.
So it's on the right track. People care about it. Organizations and companies care about it. What is happening now, though, is some are overcorrecting by trying to do things that they think matter when they don't. And I'll give you an example, right? So there's a lot of organizations out there that say we absolutely care and want to, do the best we can for our employees. And because of that, we have ping pong tables. And because of that, we have pizza parties.
Yeah.
And because of that, we take off every New Year's Eve and day. Like so they focus a little bit too much on the perks.
Yeah.
And they focus too much on those little things that happen once every year or when the employee needs it.
Yeah.
But the real work happens in behaviors.
Yeah.
How are behaviors, how do people behave, especially how do leaders behave at companies?
Yeah.
What's considered acceptable behavior? What's considered promote behavior, right? And if you really focus on those questions, you're going to create a great workplace. If you don't, you're going to focus on things that really probably cost you money and don't matter that much.
Yeah.
Because it's easier to do that. It's easier to buy these things versus, hey, let's train our managers on how to recognize their people properly. That takes time and that takes effort, even if it might be absolutely no money cost.
Yeah.
So that's what I've noticed is a lot of organizations now, they are all talking the same way.
Yeah.
But when you look at what they do, many of them just think if I buy a couple extra pizzas and, give some swag to some employees, I should expect that they're going to be happy, when really that's not where it works.
Yeah. It's always fascinating to me that people believe that will work, because if you just looked inward at your own experience and you said, hey, yeah, if there was a few more ping pong tables coming up, would I have enjoyed work more? It's like, yeah, maybe for the 20 minutes you played the game, you might have, but the leadership behavior, yeah, I mean, I wonder if some folks are just not sure they can influence that. Meaning, like, change the way people show up. Oof, that sounds hard. I mean, what in the work you guys do? I mean, what helps people actually start to believe, like, oh, this kind of thing can actually work and I can start to see changes actually happening? I mean, what have you noticed?
Yeah, it's just to go back a little bit more on what we were just talking about. Think of all the important relationships in your life, right? Think of, if you have kids, your kids, if you have a partner, a spouse, a wife or a husband. If I were to tell you, how would you improve that relationship? And your answer were, I'm going to buy them more toys or I'm going to buy them a nice ring. How would you feel about that, right? You would think to yourself, I'm probably focusing on the wrong things, or me saying that's the way to improve the relationship. It probably says more about me than about the relationship. When really people would think, I'm going to listen more. I'm going to pay more attention to when I'm with them. I'm going to be more present. I'm going to applaud their efforts.
Yeah.
That's really the same way at work. It's no different. But people think it's
weird,
different, because they're getting a paycheck.
Yeah, we think that the concept of a human relationship is somehow either doesn't even apply at work, or it's so different because it's work and therefore the things that matter. But yeah, I mean, I don't know why it makes me think of, well, if you already bought those ping pong tables, tell one of your employees to play with you, but then tell them how good a job they're doing while you're knocking the ball back and forth. Maybe be like, you're doing a really good job out there. And at least then, maybe that money didn't go totally to waste. It's a nice way to open up conversation. But yeah, I think there's something really strange about how we segment work so much in our lives that we forget that human beings are showing up there, and we don't actually know how to sometimes even act around people, which is odd. But I'm curious for you. I want to dive into some of this a little deeper, but just your own experience with work. What role does work play in your life?
Plays, I'm not going to lie, it plays a very important part, simply because I care so much about it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of one of those people that really digs deep into my work, and for good or bad reason, I see it as part of my identity. I think a lot of us do, right? What's the first question that people ask whenever we're networking? What do you do?
Yeah.
It's just the thing. So I think for me too, it's a very important part. But what I've tried to do more, especially now that, I have a family and I have a son, and, I got to pay attention to those things, and I care about those things, is how is work helping me show up better at home? And how is home helping me show up better at work, right? They go together. This whole idea of work being separate from life and vice versa, it's not a real thing. People don't turn off their brains. Like, what's that show, Severance, right?
Yeah.
That's not real. It's such an interesting concept because we know it doesn't work that way. It blends in, right? If somebody's having a terrible morning and you have an argument with your spouse, you're going to take that to work.
Absolutely.
In one way or form. And then if your boss is not giving you having a great conversation with you, or is not supporting you, you're going to bring that back to your kids.
Mm-hmm.
So I think for me, work is just another way of expressing who I am, while also being very conscious about, am I bringing my best self both ways?
Yeah. Right. That's a really healthy way to look at it. Yeah.
Which is what I'm trying to do. But sometimes, things spill over, and
sure. Yeah.
And this is what I tell a lot of people that I work with too. And something that I'm trying to do a lot myself is, it's okay if it spills over.
Yeah.
It's okay if you're having a bad morning and you bring that to your team.
Mm-hmm.
Just be clear about that. Yeah. Right. Let them know. There was this one manager that I worked with who this one time had a team meeting, and his team was going through the agenda, and something in the agenda, one of the projects, he perked up and started asking a lot of questions, like kind of really grilling the team around those sort of things.
Yeah.
For the rest of the agenda, he was pretty quiet. And so then the team afterwards huddled up and thought, oh, well, our manager clearly is really interested in that project. He asked a lot of questions on, and he's not pleased with how things went.
Yeah.
Let's spend all of our week focused on how do we improve that project. So then I talked to the manager and said, hey, I noticed that you really leaned in on that one project. Is there something particular about it? And he said, Jaime, to be honest, I wasn't paying attention to the rest of the agenda because I had a really bad morning. Just, we were scrambling, trying to get my kid to school, and we just had some fights. And the only time that I really tuned in was when that project was coming up. And then the rest of the time I was thinking about what happened at home.
Wow.
Right. But the team took a completely different message out of it. They thought, oh, well, he really cares about it, so let's put everything aside and work on it. And so I told him, next time you probably should tell him.
Yeah.
Hey, guys, I'm really distracted right now because I had some stuff at home. But no, if I'm kind of not leaning in, it's because of that, no other reason.
Yeah.
I'm a little distracted because of what happened. Being clear about it can really solve a lot.
I know what I love about that is an example of vulnerability that I think isn't necessarily what people always think of, right? I think people think, and it can also be these other things, meaning vulnerability could be, I'm actually really struggling with this project, team. I'm going to need a little bit more of your help on this because I'm not able to wrap my head around it. And I think that's more what people think about. But the simple moment of like, yeah, my head's somewhere else right now.
Mm-hmm.
Family stuff, whatever. I've got a sick kid. I've got a, whatever. The Blue Jays lost the World Series. Like, I mean, like, it could be like even as simple as that, like could actually be affecting people, but just showing the innate humanity of ourselves in a very crisp and clear way. I just think of how different you receive that. Like, oh, okay. Well, we're going to go through it as best we can, and we can always come back around if you need to catch up on it. And then you're done. And you're not spending the next week. That's where it gets frustrating, right? You spend a whole week tightening up that one spot, and then you come back to that person, and now they're like, what about these other 4 pieces?
Yeah.
Yeah, God.
There was a really interesting research project that Google did years ago called Project Aristotle.
I remember that. I don't remember exactly what it was about.
Yeah, it kind of made the rounds. So the project was all focused on exploring the question of what makes a great team great, right? And so they looked at different variables. They looked at, do you have people that are just more tenured or more educated, or they just collaborate better? Like, what's the thing that really makes a great team great? And after going through all the data and exploring all the different variables, they found out that the one thing that made teams great above and beyond anything else, the most important thing was psychological safety. Psychological safety meaning people can show up as who they are. People can say what's on their mind in a constructive way, obviously, without the fear of negative consequences because of who they are or what they said. And so, it reminds me of what you're saying. It goes back to this idea of vulnerability, is if people can feel comfortable in showing up as who they are, whether that's 50%, 10%, or 100%, knowing that their team and their boss has their back, in the long haul, they're really going to deliver more.
Yeah.
Right? They're going to speak up more. They're going to raise issues before they become big. They're going to come up with good ideas. They're going to try harder because they're like, I belong here. I feel like I am part of this team versus I'm treated like a cog. I'm treated like, a replaceable item.
Mm-hmm.
It wears on you if you feel that way. Or worse, I can't show up as who I am. Right. I got to put on a mask. And so part of their brain power is going towards keeping that mask on versus doing good work.
Yeah, that's a really great point too. I think we probably underestimate how much brain power it takes to sort of put that mask on and keep it on. And then, when you don't feel open, you're not as open to just sharing the parts of you that could actually be what you need in that situation, because you're narrowing yourself very, very much. It's a sliver of you that actually shows up instead of all of you. Yeah. There's a lot of good stuff in there. I'm curious for you. Was there anybody in your journey that was particularly helpful in helping you kind of learn some of these lessons and kind of build up some of the wisdom that you're carrying with you today?
Yeah, I have to think about someone who, when I was at Great Place to Work, ever since then has been a mentor for me. And that is the then and still CEO of Great Place to Work, Michael Bush.
Okay.
Because in the way that we work together, he taught me a lot. He is one of these men who says a lot without saying a lot, right? He's very good at listening and just asking questions and then just sitting back and letting people really speak. And then he comes in with, a great nugget of wisdom. All of a sudden, you think like, wow, that makes a lot of sense. But the one thing that he did with me that now I try to do with a lot of people that I work with or work with me is he saw that I was really curious about a particular problem that we had at the time when I first joined. And he knew that I had a lot of passion and a lot of interest in trying to solve that problem. And rather than telling me, you're young, you don't really have enough experience to really go into that one. We'll tell you when we need you, kind of thing. He asked me, he's like, do you really want to solve it? I was like, yeah, absolutely want to solve it. It really was impacting my team and it was very important. He says, okay, then let's go solve it. And I thought he was kidding, but he actually, said, okay, you're going to be in charge now of solving that problem. Let me know what you need. And then he said something that stayed with me too. He said, you are going to be leading this, which also means you're going to be fully accountable for what happens. Is that still what you want to do? Right? He didn't say, if you get it wrong, don't worry about it. He didn't say, it might not go the way you want. He said, I'm going to support you, but this is your thing now. And if it doesn't go well, it's on you because that's the work.
Yeah.
And it really said a lot.
Yeah.
It said, I trust you to do it, but at the same time, I need you to step up in ways that you haven't stepped up before.
Yeah.
And so, lessons like that really just made me who I am now as a leader, and now things that I try to do with the people that I work with in the same way. Right?
Yeah.
I often tell my team is, I'm going to support you in every way that you can. And I'm going to open up a door that if you want to walk through will lead to more growth opportunities, will lead to more opportunities for you to have a bigger impact here. And I'll be there and I'll walk, I'll hold your hand to move you forward, but you have to want to walk through that door.
Yeah.
I can't force you to want to walk through that door, because if I force you to want to walk through that door, you're really not wanting it. You're just doing it because I'm pushing you. If you want to go, I'll be right there with you, next to you, but I can't force you to walk through that door. That's got to be all you. That tells me you really want it. You want to be fully owning it, and you'd be okay holding yourself accountable toward it. So it's your choice.
That is an example, and I want to get into some of this stuff a little bit more, but when you guys are, looking at companies, and I assume you do like a survey with them and stuff like that to help figure out how well they're doing in terms of engagement and all that stuff, like that little nugget you just described, how do you capture that? I mean, that's a really cool example of trust building, of creating a culture of accountability, and honoring sort of the person's potential. And those are hard, but none of those words that I just said says it as well as the story you told. So how do you manage to capture the as best as you can the details of what really makes that culture great, through the use of the tools you have in front of you?
It starts, but it does not end with the survey.
Okay.
The survey is a helpful tool, but at the end of it, it's just a tool that provides some data that should start a bigger conversation.
Okay.
But it starts with the survey. And so if anybody out there who's in HR or leading a business and you're thinking about building a survey, just always remember to put down questions that you're ready to deal with their answers. Right? Don't ask questions that you don't want to touch. Don't ask questions that might go a way you don't want them to, and you're not going to touch those responses. You're not going to touch that data. Might as well just not ask it. Right? But in this example, as we're talking about it, it starts with asking questions around what kind of relationship do people have with their managers? Do people feel like they can trust their managers? Do people feel like they can come to their managers with problems? Do they think that their managers are going to treat them with respect? Do they think that their managers are going to hear them, right? And there's a two-way communication rather than just being told what to do, right? And then it's also about, is there a culture of accountability and ownership? And some of those things you can ask in a survey, right? Remember, the survey is going out to employees, and the employees are going to answer as truthfully as they can. But beyond the survey, you take the data and then you have a conversation, ideally with the leadership team. That's where this conversation should be. It should be the data goes from the employee's voice to the leadership's ear. And then the leadership team, ideally with the support of somebody in HR or somebody that's external, like a vendor, should then grapple with those data points and think, is this good enough for us? Right? Do we like the picture this is painting? And if it doesn't, what do we do about it?
Yeah.
If you don't even want to, like, let's say you don't want to do a survey at all, right? For whatever reason, you think it's the wrong thing for you, or you just don't have the budget for it. A really quick and easy way to find out what kind of culture you actually have is, again, if the leadership team can get in a room and answer the question of what has happened when things go really well here, and what has happened when things don't go well here. And is that what we want?
Yeah.
Right. Because the first question, you're going to come up with the stories of greatness, right? You're going to come up with all the lore that is there at that company. If you remember when we pulled an all-nighter to deliver that project the next day and everybody was happy. Okay, so what made that so important and successful? Was it that people worked really hard? Was it that they collaborated well together? Was it that they put the customer first? That tells you a lot about the culture that you have. Yeah. Same as when things don't go well, what didn't we do, right, that we should have?
Yeah.
What behaviors did we not exhibit that we should have? And then the third one is that what we want? And if you look at that, you look at the stories of greatness and you look at the stories where things are not going well, and you say, yeah, that kind of works for us, right? Like, we didn't do that because we're not that kind of company and we don't want to be that kind of company. Great. But if your answer is no, that does not work well for us, then you have a culture without knowing it already.
Yeah.
And so it's up to you to decide to mold it or not. Like, you don't need a survey necessarily for that. There's already a lot of data out there for you to explore.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I can picture, different answers to some of those questions in different companies, certainly in my own experience. Like, I could actually see some companies where the moments of greatness might be hard to find because you've kind of maybe just coasted a little bit so that nothing really stands out. Yeah, we've had some good days, but blah, blah, blah. But they might also not have any of the deep negatives, right? They just kind of play in that middle ground. And then others, they're super high highs, but they're really low lows. And, what I wonder is, how do you create a culture where you get an outsized number of the highs versus the lows? Because sometimes those lows, they feel exponentially worse even than the highs. Like, you've abandoned any sense of values. All the things that you've been told over the last 6 months are who we are suddenly get abandoned because we lost a piece of business, or this client's putting us up for review, or the client really hated that project that we delivered, and now we have to do things that we said we wouldn't do. How do you minimize some of that low stuff while still giving people room to stretch for the big stuff?
Yeah, I think you have to think of it as there's almost like two trend lines. There's the business trend line, and then there's the culture trend line, right? You have to think of it as like two separate, that often, hopefully, they go in the same direction, but you may have those situations, like you said, where a client did not like what you delivered, right? And so you have a low, but are you dealing with that low in a way that still feels like you're following your values?
Yeah.
Right. If you have a client that did not like the deliverable, you have the option of saying, well, are we just going to try harder to fix it for the client because that's who we are? Or are we just going to like shrug our shoulders and think, well, sometimes we can't get it right, so let's go to the next one. Right. That's the cultural side of it. So you're going to have your highs and you're going to have your lows. And the same thing goes whenever you have a really high, right? Whenever everything's going really well and you just, you close the big client, or, everything is humming along really great. What are you doing in those moments culturally that can be sustained over time? Like, are you still looking for opportunities to improve the way that you work? Are you still asking your employees, is there something else that you need from us in order to be successful? Or are you coasting and, just saying, well, it's a high, so let's just ride it out? You have to think of it as like two different trend lines. Because otherwise, if things go low and the culture goes with it, then the next low is going to be even lower, right? And at the same thing for like the highs, you're not really going to understand why you achieved that high.
Yeah.
So I think it has to be like both together, but not in the same wavelength.
Yeah, there's a certain amount of intention in that, meaning, when you experience a high in some places, it feels good because the high feels good, meaning, yay, we won the piece of business, but there wasn't really anything actively done around that high in terms of maybe providing some recognition. Like you said, maybe looking like what else could we do to maybe do even better? Finding ways to learn from it. Like, wow, what made this work so well? What was different about it? So that you're just allowing the emotion of the business line to pull you around a little bit, as opposed to having a culture line that can maybe the high isn't even quite as high. It's more like a little bit lower, but it's because there's a little bit of thought put into how do we want to experience this high? Yeah, let's celebrate, but also let's see what we can learn. And then the lows, yeah, like, okay, that didn't go great. Who do we want to be in the lows,
Yeah. And one thing that helps too, regardless of where you are, if you're having a great year business wise or not, or if you think your culture's in the tank or doing great, one thing that anybody can do right away, right now, to just start going in the right track is being aware about these things, right? Like having the conversation at the C-suite, at the leadership table. How are we doing? Right? Do we see that our people are behaving the way that we want them to, that we think is going to make us proud of running this organization, or are things running a little bit differently and we need to start digging into that one?
Yeah.
Right. It's really about the self-awareness as an organization, because then that leads to, do we need to have a survey? Do we need to have focus group? Do we need to tell managers that you need to ask your people how they feel about these things and then kick that back up? Right? But the first question is just being a little bit self-aware about what's going on, rather than just assuming things are fine because we're hitting our numbers, or assume things are terrible because we're not.
Yeah.
Right. You need to kind of take a pause there and really be reflective.
Yeah, I think that's a hard thing for a lot of organizations. It's like you kind of just want to ride the highs and almost ignore the lows, or like, all right, we're going to get through the lows as fast as we can. But that's not really building a culture. I think, to your point, the culture comes from listening to people. And one of the things that showed up in what you were saying, that you mentioned kind of talking to the team and talking to the leadership. And one thing I notice in organizations is the experience of work is actually quite different. Like, if you're in that particularly top layer of leadership, and what work looks like day to day is very different, so that you can be really skewed. If you're in the leadership within a company, like, you may really have no idea what it's like to actually work there. You're in this sort of top 10% of the organization. You mentioned some of the things you guys do. Is there anything else that sort of just on a day-to-day behavioral thing that you can do as a leader to really understand what the team is going through, versus just looking at the results of what they're giving you?
Yeah, absolutely. One question that people don't often ask, especially if you have a team underneath you, is asking them, how are you? And then asking them, how are you really, after that? Because whenever people ask, how are you? I'm fine. This is great. I'm okay. Good. Yeah. Having a great day. Yeah. How are you really, though? Then you usually get to the nuggets of what's going on. Yeah. And that's a question that doesn't get asked often, because, again, we sometimes as leaders don't want to know the answer to that, right? We just say, I hope they say things are going really well, because if they say the otherwise, I don't know what to do with that information. Yeah. And I tell leaders, and myself too, because I sometimes know that I should ask the question, but I'm squirming in my seat because I think, I don't really want to know. I do want to know, but only if it's good news. I ask them, it's not your job necessarily all the time to have the answers to things. Sometimes you're just there to listen. And sometimes you're just there to say, how is it going? And then listen to what they're saying. And you just say, I hear you, and that must be difficult. I'm sure we can figure out a way. Let's keep talking about this. Yeah. That could be enough. Right. So remember that listening doesn't necessarily mean solving. It just means listening.
Mm-hmm.
And you would be surprised at how much just having a listening, focused conversation, a leader can alleviate some of the stress within his team or her team just by asking the question.
Yeah.
Right. And listening, truly listening to what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing you don't want to do if you ask something like that is to become combative. Because then you have immediately signaled to that person that the next time you have anything that's not positive, I'm going to fight you on it.
Yeah.
Right? If you have something not positive,
and then it's not safe, right?
So what is that person going to do? They're not going to bring you the stuff that you don't want to hear, right? And so what happens there is exactly what you're saying, where you're only going to hear the good news. Even when things are rotten inside, you're going to hear, oh, everything's fine. Don't worry about it. Things are great. And then 2 weeks later, you find out that everything's falling apart.
Yeah. Right? Yeah. Or you find out that that person is now quitting or, like all that stuff. And yeah, I mean, I really like the how are you really question. And I like how you described the very simple answer of, I hear you. That must be hard. Let's keep talking about it and see what we can come up with. Like those things, super simple, but probably that behavior is missing from 80+% of work cultures. I feel like just the permission to not have the answer and to be just honest about that, but also invite them to be a part of the conversation. We're going to work on this together. Keep, feeding me what's coming on for you. And I'm going to keep thinking about this, And
I think part of that is because very few managers get taught how to manage. Yeah, there was a stat around 37% of managers, only 37% of managers have had some kind of formal leadership training to start their management career. So that's like not even 4 out of 10 managers out there, right? That somewhat know what to do. The other 6 out of 10 are walking around with, without a playbook. They don't know how to do these sort of things. They don't know how to recognize properly. They don't know how to coach someone for performance. They don't know how to have that kind of conversation, right? They're afraid to have it and they don't know how to have it. So they won't.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
They won't check with their team. They won't do one-on-ones because they're like, what do I do in these one-on-ones? And what happens when they give me something that's critical? What happens when they say something that they don't like about how I run the team? Right? They take it personally because they realize, they don't have any of these tools. So that's the thing too, for anybody that's, in a position where you can introduce leadership training or leadership development opportunities. They're incredibly important, especially right now when there's so much uncertainty going on in the business world. People are craving leaders to instill calm and focus and help them be successful. And right now, a lot of leaders, the majority of them, don't even know how to lead.
Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, technically, I had leadership training. I had a 2-hour leadership workshop at one place I worked at in my entire career. So I was trained, but not really. Yeah. I mean, my experience was, kind of a cafeteria style, grabbing a little bit from each leader that I'd had in my own experience and going, I kind of like the way they did that and the way they did that. But you learn pretty quickly, like, either I'm not actually wired the same way, so I don't quite know how to deliver that approach, or that worked for me, but that doesn't work for 80% of the people on my team because they're wired differently than I am.
Yeah.
So, I think, there are a lot of assumptions made within corporate America in general. And as a leader, I think we end up assuming a lot of things, and that doesn't end well almost ever, Yeah.
But you have great self-awareness, right? To be able to even think about those things. Like, what do I like about these leaders? What works for me? What doesn't? I think that too is a skill that can be taught, and that isn't taught for the majority of managers out there. Is find your own way of how you can lead in a way that feels authentic to you, but still works. You also need to be somewhat self-aware.
Yeah.
Right? Because you're constantly learning. I mean, there's a lot of things that 10 years ago I did that now I look back on and I'm cringing at because I can't believe I did it. There's stuff that I did 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, I could have handled that better.
Yeah.
But if you don't have that level of self-awareness and reflection, you're not going to learn. Right. It's not so much about years of experience. It's about moments of reflection that help you get better over time.
Yeah. Another simple habit though, right? We can just instill that habit in anybody. Any of us can go, okay, I just want to, the end of the week or whatever it is, just look back at some of the things that happened and go, how do I feel about what I did? And how can I learn to be better? Whether that's stuff on my own, or do I need to talk to that person where things didn't go well? That's, I think, the beauty about leadership development is most of it is not hard. Like, it's not like, oh my God, I have to work 24/7 or do that. It's just building up some good habits, being self-aware, learning how to listen better, having some ability to handle your emotional state in a way that is, healthy for you and those around you. I mean, those are kind of like the big things, certainly what I'm hearing from what you're talking about,
Yeah, absolutely. Because remember, you're the lighthouse for your team.
Yeah.
You're the one that's like telling them where to look, what to do. They're looking at you to think, should I be panicking right now? Or are we having a good moment? Or do we need to worry about something? You're setting the emotional tone for your team as a leader. Mm. And the other thing that, especially for people who have just become managers for the first time or are joining a team as a manager for the first time, almost everything that you're doing is a signal to your team. You have to be aware of the influence that you now have, where if you're wincing at something, if you are leaning in on a certain conversation, if you're asking a lot of questions about something, if you're very silent, your team is trying to figure out, what does that mean? What is he or she trying to tell me with that? Because you have influence, and so they want to be in your good graces. So remember that you are now being seen in a completely different way than you were when you were just a peer. So you got to be careful about how you show up in front of your team.
That's a great point. And I think there's a way to do that doesn't feel anxiety provoking, right? Because it could feel like, oh my God, but it's, I think a lot of just being aware of that is probably half the battle, just knowing, and then giving yourself some grace that, like, sometimes I'm not going to show up exactly how I want to in a situation, but be aware that, hey, if I was silent for an entire meeting, that might have an impact on my team. And then perhaps I want to circle back with them at some point to go, hey guys, I was lost in thought on something else. I've got another thing I'm dealing with, whether home or work. So I was kind of quiet during that. Didn't mean anything other than that. And just kind of coming back to some of your earlier points where it's just a quick acknowledgement and then let them kind of handle it appropriately as they can. You mentioned the whole thing about, the sort of chaos of work right now, and work is changing so fast, obviously AI, but just the speed of everything just feels intense. Is anything showing up in terms of who leaders need to be right now that is distinct or different than maybe 5 or 10 or 15 years ago that you've seen?
I think the role of clarity in communication is just more important than ever. And especially when things are changing so much, there's not enough answers to go around, and people are looking for some kind of guidance. Is you need to have leaders that can share information when they know what's going on, as well as when they don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
Right. And there's just so much going on right now where change, you hear this all the time, but it's still true. Change is happening at a faster pace now than it was 5 years, 10 years ago. And so that requires leaders to be much more proactive about how they communicate with their team. So an example of that is, what we're just talking about right now. If there's a conversation in a team meeting and somebody raises a question, the leader and the manager is completely fine saying, I don't know the answer to that, but let's figure it out. Rather than coming up with something on the fly that is totally not true.
Yeah.
Right. It is okay to just say, I don't know, or that's a great question. Let me figure that out.
Yeah.
What you don't want is to create something and make something up or feed into whatever anxiety they have and say, you know what? Absolutely. I don't know what that is. Why don't we know what that is? We should totally.
Right.
And then, you feed it back
Yeah.
because then everybody else thinks, well, if he doesn't know what it is, then obviously we're all in trouble. So you have to remember that during times of change, more than ever, you have to be clear in your communication and you also have to be steady in your presence. When people are coming to you with questions and exclamation points and all that, you do not want to feed back into that. You don't want to make anything up.
Right.
But you also want to say, okay, let's figure it out together. I hear you. That is a valid point. I'm sure we can sort it out. Let me look into it.
Yeah.
You want to bring down the volume with them as much as possible, because if you don't, they already have their own tizzy in their head. You're going to make it worse.
Yeah. I'm a lot of stuff is playing from the previous parts of my work career button on the rewind machine. I mean, I'm picturing both examples. What that means is this, and I'm making it up the whole way. And, this guy I read about who knows about AI said this, so I think we'll probably do that. And, everybody hears all those cues in there that basically go, oh, so he's talking out of his butt right now, right? And then the other one is this comes back to some of that emotional regulation, like, oh my God, yeah, that is a big deal. Like, and I can picture those moments where somebody, or maybe even I've probably done this, like, oh my God, that's huge. Oh my God, what are we going to do? Let's figure that out right now. We better figure that out right now. Cause and like, my blood pressure is going up just reenacting it.
Yeah. Cause what happens a lot whenever we're seeing change in front of us, even if we think it's going to be positive change, human beings don't do well with change overall. And the reason that we don't do well with change is because in our brain, it's hardwired that whenever something is unknown in front of us, we should be ready for the worst case scenario for the sake of our survival. Right. Like, go back hundreds of thousands of years. We saw a bush in front of us that was all of a sudden shaking. We thought, okay, there's a tiger right there. I got to run. Right. We did not think there's a nice, cute little lizard that I can go hang out with.
Right.
We thought the worst case scenario. So the same thing is here now. So what you want to do as a manager and as a leader is help clarify that for them as much as possible. And also you want to give them information, even if it's incomplete, right? Even if something's in progress. So if they're saying, hey, what's going on with that latest initiative that everybody said was so important? Did it work out as we expected it to? It's okay for you to say, you know what? The last that I heard, it was still in progress. We still don't know what's going on. There were a couple of hiccups, but they're working through it.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah.
You don't want to say something like, who knows? I'm not sure, even if you absolutely know what's going on, because then that person that asked the question is going to fill it in with the worst case scenario. Right? It's like, oh, I don't have the answer for that. Therefore, it must be going terribly. Right? It must be falling apart. I'm going to lose my job. I should start updating my LinkedIn profile. You want to fill in the space there as much as you can with what you know.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's going to fill in with the worst case scenario.
Yeah. And I can, I would love if there was a way to quantify just the amount of time spent / wasted on the spin outs that happen from all of these different possible ways of dealing with stuff when you don't have that nice, measured, thoughtful response. And people are then spinning out of control, updating their resume or doubling down to work on something that really doesn't need to be worked on. I mean, it's got to be, if you took it across our whole economy, it's probably $1 trillion+ worth of waste in there. And we're never going to get rid of it. But man, if you could cut 10% of $1 trillion of waste, that's a giant improvement. I wanted to touch on a little bit you do these surveys and you do some of these things where it's kind of like the best companies to work for, right? You provide like lists and things like that for folks. I've noticed that some people don't always trust those. They go, oh, it's sort of just, it's pay to play, or it's, everybody lies on the answers. How do you mitigate against some of the things that might create an untrustworthy outcome? What helps you guys get to the real story?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I, being in this space for a long time, I've heard that criticism too. And to be fair, there are some programs out there that are pay to play, right? You write a nice essay, you submit it to an organization, and they give you a stamp of approval because you said your organization is great and you worded it very nicely, and you paid a fee, then you get the stamp, right?
Yeah.
So the way that ours works is the only way that somebody could be recognized as a best place to work by Best Companies Group in any of the programs that we do is that after we send out surveys directly to employees and they give us the feedback directly back to us. So there's never a point in there when the company can step in and pick and choose answers or responses. After we do that, we put that into an algorithm that we use that not only weighs the employees' responses appropriately, but also we go in there to check to see if there is any funny business going on, right? So what we do is we take a look at comments, seeing if they are very similar. Maybe somebody was just copying and pasting the same one over. We take a look at even things like how often or how quickly a survey was completed.
Yeah.
If somebody completed a 72 question survey in 30 seconds, that tells us somebody was doing 5, all the way down, right? So we take a look at all of these things, and if it raises a red flag, we investigate that and potentially disqualify that company.
Wow.
So
that's great.
There's a lot of things that we do to just get ahead of that as much as possible. We also, take a look at, are they incentivizing their employees to rate things positively? And if they win the award, everybody gets a pizza party, right? These are the sort of things that we really dig into.
Yeah.
Because what we don't want is companies who are recognized through these programs to feel like they, don't deserve it. We want everybody to feel like they deserved it whenever they're on this list and to feel proud of the fact that they were recognized because their employees, their feedback said so, not some gaming of the system.
Yeah, this is all really interesting. I've thought about creating something with my whole Desuckify thing. I'm like, you're a Desuckified place to work kind of a thing.
Yeah.
So I've always often wondered, I don't know if that's something we could partner with you guys on or something, but that's kind of where my brain goes. The one thing I was thinking of with that is like again, some of the stories that show up at work, like the story I hear a lot is I'm told this is my job, but then half of my job is people in the C-suite just dump stuff on me, and I hear that a lot from a lot of clients and others. And like those kinds of things, like how do you tease that out from somebody? Like, is that about workload management? Where does that start to show up? Something like that.
Yeah, well, there's a couple of questions within the survey that we have that could get to that. Like, for example, one is, I'm giving the resources I need to do my job well, right? That's one. Another one is we have realistic deadlines for our work. That's another one. And then we have a series of questions where we not only ask them about how they feel about their senior leadership and C-suite, but also how they feel about their immediate supervisor. Do they think that they treat them with respect? Do they think that, they provide them the proper guidance to be able to do their work well? So it's like literally 72 questions that we ask on all of those topics. And then we have 2 open-ended questions at the end where we essentially ask them, what works really well here and what would you wish were different?
Oh, I like that. That's great.
And then so we end up getting a lot of qualitative feedback through that where people are very honest and say things like that, right? They say, you know what? I often get a lot of the work dumped on me from the C-suite and it's not part of my job description. And so I'm asked to do all of these things. Okay, so we take that into account as we end up rating all of these companies. And, as I mentioned, the survey, is it perfect? No, it's not perfect. There's things there that we wish that we could get deeper on and all that. But it is, I think, a very effective tool at figuring out what companies are doing really well and which of them are really excelling. Yeah. And for those that want to use the survey for the sake of just getting better, whether they make a best place to work list or not, it's a great tool to start the conversation of how can we become an organization that would be worthy of becoming a best place to work.
Yeah. I like that. What do you feel is the conversation about work that we're not having right now that we need to be having?
The conversation around work that I think we need to have more is focusing more on building and helping employees be fulfilled rather than just happy or satisfied or engaged. There's a lot of this, let's have happy employees, let's have satisfied employees, and that's great. That's a good, nice table stakes that we should all strive for.
Yeah.
But I'm much more interested in how do we create an environment where employees feel fulfilled? And that comes from providing opportunities for growth. That comes from supporting them through those opportunities for growth. And that comes from rewarding them when they go through those growth opportunities, right? That's how you really get employees to be fulfilled. And then lastly, it's that they feel like they're part of something larger than themselves, that they feel like they're solving a problem the world needs to be solving, that they are part of a team, that they are part of an organization whose values they really appreciate.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how you get fulfillment, is by feeling like you're part of something bigger. So I think I would love for there to be more of a conversation around fulfilled workplaces and fulfilled employees versus just happy or satisfied.
I love that. I'm 100% with you on that. And, maybe we can crack the code on that and find a way to make that happen, because I think that's really critical. I've been asking you a bunch of questions. I'd love to give you a chance to turn one around towards the audience. Do you have something you'd like to ask them?
Yeah, I would ask them, especially if you're in a position to, in HR or in like you're a business leader that has the influence to do something like this, is really think about when's the last time you asked your people what they thought and did something with the data, right? Not just when you asked them what they thought and then you reviewed it and read it and, just put it away. When's the last time that you asked them what they thought about what it was like to work there at your organization and took some actionable steps on that data to make it better for them? If you can't remember the last time you did that, it's probably, time to start doing that now. Yeah.
I love that. Yeah. I feel like the first half of that question, it's like, oh, sure. I always ask people, how they're doing. What are you doing? What could we do better here? Oh, taking action on it. That's a little trickier. So I like that. That's a nice little zinger on the end of that question to make it harder for people. Sort of related to that, what would a fully desuckified world of work look like to you? If you could wave a magic wand and just make it so, what would that look like?
A world of work where people felt like they belonged where they were, where they could show up as who they are, where they could feel like they're part of something larger than themselves, and where they really see themselves growing at the pace that they want to grow, whether it's slow growth over years or, rocket ship kind of growth where they just really want to go to the next step as soon as possible, but they feel like they have a pathway to that wherever they are.
I like the sound of that. Yeah. Now we're going to get a little silly. If you listen to my show at all, you hear some sound effects, mostly cats meowing and stuff like that. And I always invite the guest to create a sound that we can add to the library, and it'll show up somewhere in the intro to this show. So you got a sound effect for us, Jaime?
Well, I'm an old school gamer.
Okay.
I grew up on Super Nintendo, and I grew up on playing, Mario Brothers and all that. So my sound effect for anybody that out there has played it is doo-doo doo-doo doo-doo, which is, if anybody's ever played any of the Mario levels, especially, or Mario games, especially 1, 2, or 3, that's the sound to Bowser's Castle. So it just brings back memories. I love that game.
Oh, that's awesome. I love that. I love when something's like really like visceral and brings back a memory. That's really great.
Yeah.
So the last question I'll ask is just, how do people connect with you? How do they find you online, find out more about your company, all that good stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for having me here. You can learn more about everything that we do at Best Companies Group by going to bestcompaniesgroup.com. And you can find me on LinkedIn. So it's linkedin.com/in/Jaime Zepeda.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Jaime, for coming on and giving me a lot to think about. which is, that's the dream here, is to have some stuff to chew on that we can continue to try to work on and make work not suck, and hopefully create some awesome places that people can work at.
Yeah, it was great. I love the questions. They were fantastic. So thanks for the conversation, TJ.
Awesome. Bye. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone, for tuning in to the DesuckifyWork podcast. And a huge thanks to Jaime for bringing clarity and curiosity to the show. You can follow Jaime on LinkedIn and check out his company's site at bestcompaniesgroup.com to learn more about their Best Places to Work programs. If you enjoyed the conversation and would like to find some calm in the chaos of work, I invite you to schedule a free half-hour discovery session. Type meow in the calendar invite, and I'll also send you a free DesuckifyWork t-shirt. Bye, everyone.